Hello, everybody. You are once again, or maybe for the first time, but either way, listening to the Dead Money with Dan Arfin podcast. I am the host, Dan Arfin, and this Dead Money with Dan Arfin episode is brought to you by Dan Arfin, someone most people have decided they can do without, especially women. I'm very excited to talk to you today because today we, meaning I, have our first ever guest on the Dead Money podcast. My phone has been ringing off the hook these last couple weeks, and I've barely slept a wink because of it, with people demanding, some of whom who were being rather threatening, that I bring someone on to talk to. So I said, fine. True story. So our guest today, what an honor and a pleasure it is to be sitting down with longtime veteran pro poker player Mike Zulker. Mike and I have been friends for 14 years now, which says a lot about his tolerance now that I think about it, because if you can take 14 years of me, then you can probably take 14 years of a lot of things. But before we start picking what's left of his brain, because you've had head injuries too, right, Mike? Yeah. Okay. So first I'll tell you a little about who Mike is and why you need to listen to what he has to say. So Mike's he's an aficionado at a multitude of things. Poker and sports betting go together like bacon and eggs. I nicknamed him Google a little while ago because every fucking time I text him about a sports story or a poker story or something drama related with an athlete, he already knows about it. I've never told him anything where his response is like, oh shit, that's crazy. No, he's always says, oh yeah, it's like I was just talking about that. He gets everything before everybody. I don't know how he does it. Because it's not like I'm just late to hear about everything. I catch things quickly once in a while. But he's always on top of it. And that goes hand in hand with the way he plays poker. Now, Mike and I, perhaps surprisingly, have only played so much poker together, but I can tell you from the time we did put in that he possesses a table presence that few players possess. Mike is one of not that many pro poker players who is actually also good for a game. Most people who crush are not people that recreational players particularly enjoy playing with, because oftentimes they're just these uninteresting people who don't really even try to feign the image that you're anything to them besides a target. So Mike is able to balance playability with personability, and that is a very unique distinction. And one of the best skills I felt a poker player going to have for many years is getting a player's state of mind and perception of how they should be doing things completely disoriented. And that's just another way of saying he gets them to play really bad. It's actually a skill that in the last few years, I think I've realized I possess a little more than I thought I did because of how many players I'm able to get to silently hate me just by being myself. But I don't do it to the level that Mike does it. It's much more visible. And because of it, it gets him a lot of action. So you might just say that through and through, Mike is a gifted natural salesman who could sell you the skin off of a dead body. But more importantly, he's been a triple threat in poker for some time now. He plays live MTTs, he plays online, and he's been in the big stakes cash games these last bunch of years as well. And in fact, it seemed like when I was pretty much getting out of those games for the most part is around the time when he was not starting to get into them, but I think was making them much more of his mainstay. So our career trajectories just somehow didn't really cross paths that much. But he's still a sicko. I burned out from it. I did my time, and I've had enough of that. But Mike is still on the up and up with it and has just the right amount of bloodthirst to keep going. And you really need so much more of that today than you did 10 or 15 years ago, because you got the bomb pots every 30 minutes, whether it's double board, PLO, or God knows what the fuck degenerate stuff they're doing in his games. You got the stand-up game constantly cycling. You got all these other funky elements which pertain to shoveling money into the pot before anyone has taken an actual normal hand of poker. The culture of high-stakes cash and what's expected of those who show up to play has really changed these last few years. You know, we're just in a different era of poker now. And it's amazing how gradual the transition is, yet sudden, it seems, because you wake up one day and realize how different everything is now compared to what it used to be. But with the World Series of Poker finally upon us over the next 7 or 8 weeks, Las Vegas will, of course, be flooded with tens of thousands of dummies. I mean, people trying to make a fast and furious buck at poker. So let's ask him. Mike, as you're still out there in the trenches with your binoculars, tell us, what do you see out there right now? How do you perceive the world of poker in 2025? What do people want to be doing with poker? What are they actually doing? What should they be doing? And why aren't they doing it? Now, I know all that's a little bit of a mouthful, so you can answer that in any order you want and however you want. But, all right, everybody, without further ado, this is it. This is Mike Zulker, everybody.
Thank you, Dan. It's great to be here on the Dead Money podcast. And as a longtime listener, it's kind of exciting to be your first guest. I always thought you were just in a basement by yourself. I really appreciate the intro. I can't believe it's been 14 years. I mean, that's a lot longer than most healthy marriages. And I've had to put up with you about as long as most people have to put up with their wife. So I guess that's a good thing in some ways. Yeah, the World Series is upon us, and the rat race begins. I actually kicked it off the other night by stone bubbling my first tournament.
All right, set the tone.
Yeah. I figured why not go in swinging. So I went into the win $1,100 1.5 mil guarantee, and I put 5 bullets in over 3 flights in 2 days and walked away with 5 pieces of paper that I get to show Uncle Sam at the end of the year, and there's probably 100 more where those came from coming this summer. And unfortunately, in tournament life, that's just what it's going to be for 95% of the players that enter these things. But I played a pot on the stone bubble for the chip lead, and I decided I either wanted to go into day 2 with all the chips or none, and the simulation chose none. We flipped for it, and I didn't come out ahead, and that's just the case with a lot of these. It's the first of many flips to come. But they still draw me back. You know, tournaments have this euphoria and this, dopamine hit that you take like you're hitting a joint or, taking a shot. And for some reason, we all know it's bad for us, but we go back anyway. So, yeah, you mentioned I've been around a while. So I started playing poker when I was about 13, just playing like quarters, nickels, dimes with friends, like 5-card draw games, things like that. And when I was about 17, the Moneymaker boom happened. I was still in high school, but they aired it on ESPN, and I thought it was a fake name. I was like, this guy's got a stage name? I didn't know they had that in poker. So I just assumed his name was like Chris Williams or some shit, and they just decided to give him the name Moneymaker, which I actually thought was kind of cool. And then they show Sammy Farha, and this guy's got a cigar and the slick back hair like someone straight out of a mob movie. And this is what you're looking at, and it kind of worked out because I graduated high school and I tore my shoulder up with a sports injury and had surgery and just had to sit around all summer. And I watched a lot of poker, and I had friends come over and we would play home games, like $20 buy-ins, $25 buy-ins. I started playing online, full tilt poker, party poker, Pacific poker, which is now 888. And it just hooked me immediately. The competition, the ability to just navigate and strategize. Games were always exciting to me, board games and sports. So this was a way to continue competing, even though I couldn't do anything as my arm was in a sling. So I watched all the World Series episodes that they aired, and the WPT was getting popular around then, and I found myself playing online, playing sit and goes, playing cash, a little bit of tournaments. Really had no idea what the hell I was doing, but neither did anybody. It was like the Wild West. People were just shooting from the hip, and some people were lucky enough not to get shot. And so honestly, I was fortunate enough to come out of those times, but it wasn't always easy. I mean, when I started off, I was loading money on, busting rolls. I was, rebuying. I had my whole roll on the table many a times, and then cashing out, buying a pickup truck, cashing out, taking a trip. And honestly, there was no rhyme or reason or strategy to what I was doing. It wasn't like, okay, I'm going to play these sit and goes because this is my ROI. I'm going to choose these cash games because this player and this player. I mean, I was trying, but the good thing is it didn't matter back then. because just everybody was so terrible that anybody could win. So I got the hang of it pretty quick, and at one point I ran $50 into about 30,000, and that was my best come up, and I thought I had finally made it. I was on Full Tilt Poker playing the biggest stakes that I think they offered at the time. I think it was 25-50 no limit. I was 19 years old, living in my parents' house still, and I had already dropped out of college like maybe a month before. Maybe I was still in college. I can't fully remember, but I remember it was like late at night, and I had a lot of friends that would virtually rail me. They would go online and watch me play and send me text messages, and these were some of the same guys I was playing $20 sit and goes and cash games with a year or two earlier in high school in my first year of college. And I get into a hand where I have pocket kings, and someone raises, and I 3-bet. He 4-bets me. I 5-bet him. Remember, this is like 2004, 2005. So
just put the money in with kings.
Yeah, we have pocket kings. Let's fucking go.
What are we doing?
So he calls, and we get a queen jack 3 flop. And of course, back then, this is just the stone nuts in a 5-bet pot. And nowadays, you got the Europeans sitting there and just checking and, terrified out of their mind on this board in a 5-bet pot, wondering how they got here. And I he leads into me, which was surprising. I raise with pocket kings on the board. He calls. The turn, much to my delight, is a king. He checks. I go all in. He snap calls. He's got the 9-10 suited. And a set does not beat a straight unless the river card pairs. And it did not. So I watched all of my money in a flash, full tilt style, the way you just hear the chips move, scoop right into his hands, into my virtual opponent, and I was left with nothing except shock and disappointment. I sat there for a little while, and it was just kind of shocking. I didn't really know what to do or say. My parents were asleep. It's midnight. I'm getting text messages and calls, probably mostly phone calls in that day. Text messages were probably fairly new, if I recall. I'm pretty old these days. And I'm not answering the phone. I walk to my kitchen, and I just sit on the kitchen counter in the dark, just not knowing what to do or say. And I just sat there for a while. It's the first time I ran up such a big number and lost it all. I had busted my roll many times at this point, but, we're talking $1,000, $2,000, $1,500. But this was the big spin. This is the biggest stakes they had on there at the time, and this was, my opportunity to like go big. And I got sent back down to the minors immediately.
Yeah, I'm only a year older than you, and just thinking about the way everyone played back then is, God, I wish I could have just been like 15 years older. I mean, because I had like you're describing the hand, I'm thinking like basically my the more I think about it now, back in the day, in the very beginning, if I had top pair, I was just trying as hard as I could to get the stacks in at some point during the hand. And while that sounds insane and just like too automatic, it was like generally good to be doing.
Yeah.
People were getting it in with so much, they were shoveling in so much money like on the flop, and then they would just commit to calling it off on the turn, and like that was it. Like you could be into this 5-bet situation. The guy could have had like ace jack and like you would stack them. It's like, as you're describing the hand to me, bet, raise, call, like I'm like, yeah, right, you have an overpair, like you have better than top pair, like
right.
This, if you lose, it's just a horrific beat, because you could get stacks in with these kinds of hands time after time after time and always be ahead.
Yeah, I mean, in 2025, the poker landscape's very different, and if I found myself in a 5-bet pot with kings and watched a queen and a jack fall against an unknown player, I would be terrified that I had to check fold.
I mean,
and I mean, I'm somewhat kidding, but it's just such a different world. And again, it wasn't like I was some expert back then. I was not playing full time. I was going to college at Arizona State and just kind of like playing on the side, but I played a lot, and you find yourself in that spot and you feel like you get the gin card, and then all of a sudden he shows up with a hand that you never expect. But back then it was not that unexpected because it was just the Wild West. Like,
no, I know. I mean, it's hearing you describe it. It's like you had your first great heater when you're going literally up the roller coaster. You're just going up slowly and slowly and slowly, and it's so exciting and it's so fun. And then when you hit your first downswing, you fucking tank. And it's like probably going to happen to everybody who's lucky enough to even have that initial run, whether they deserve it or not. Like, I was playing online in like 05, 06, or yeah, like 06, 07. I'm like a part-time professional player. And I won like, over the course of a few months, like 35,000 online. And feeling amazing, you know? I'm like 21 years old, and it's like I just, you know, I have a job too, but like...
Yeah, you feel on top of the world.
I feel like I'm really ascending into something like that's incredible. And I'm only fucking 21 years old. And it's like... And it's not that I wasn't doing that. It's just... It's like, but here's what comes next. It takes 35,000 over X number of months, but... Then I lost 13,000 in 2 days, and I did not play any poker for the next several months because it was just like, it's like you win fight after fight after fight after fight, and then you fight a champion or a real contender, and you get knocked out in the center of the ring in the first fucking round.
Yeah, it's kind of like Rocky 3, where Rocky's just going through all the scrubs, and then Clubber Lang comes in and sends him back. And then he's got to go and train and find Eye of the Tiger. You know, that's kind of how it feels. But yeah, I mean, to your point, I think after that, I went maybe 2-3 months without playing at all. Like, I just didn't have it in me. Like, I busted my entire roll. And look, I was 19. I actually had a pretty good job in sales, which is what I did before poker. I was still in school, or maybe just getting out of school again. Those times are a little bit fuzzy. I mean, I majored in beer pong and minored in flip cup at Arizona State. So it was a little bit of a confusing time. But what I do remember is not wanting to play again and not picking up a mouse for quite a while. But eventually, like all, you know, vices, you find yourself back in there, and the competition was very big for me. You know, I couldn't really stay away. I mean, plus everybody was just loving poker back then. We were in a different era, and I really think that people don't realize that the poker era in the early 2000s to mid 2000s up till about Black Friday in 2011, there's commercials advertising this stuff everywhere. And it's not like today. Like, sure, you see a GG commercial. There was a Party Poker or Full Tilt or Pacific Poker or DoylesRoom.com or PokerRoom.com or MikeZulker.com. If I wanted to make it, I should have bought a spot on GoDaddy and made my own poker site back then, and then I would have never had to pick up another card. But the reality is it was in your face, and everyone loved it. You know, everyone loved playing poker. Celebrities, they had a Bravo TV show with Celebrity Poker. Phil Gordon wrote a book series called The Gold Book, The Black Book, The Green Book. I mean, and everybody was an author. And the funny thing is there was very little content back then. We have more vlogging and content than we've ever had before. And this era of poker doesn't even come close to what we were in back then.
Yeah, and I read a lot of little pieces of poker pros back then. I don't think there was a single book I read, but I read pieces of a bunch of different books. And a lot of the advice I think that was given then was just like, oh, this is what I do and it works for me and I win lots of money and you should do this. I mean, today it's very, very like organized and developed. It's almost like poker back in the day was like the UFC in the beginning, where you got guys difference of weight and 100 pounds. Like, who knows how much time they spent getting ready for the fight, what their training was. I mean, it's so developed now, you know, like weight classes and everyone weighs the same thing. And when you watch these guys fight, they look like fucking Street Fighter in Mortal Kombat. It's fucking beautiful. But like poker back in the day, it was just a fucking circus.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like the strategies, I read in Doyle Brunson's Super System. This is what it says. The literature says this. If you flop a set of trips. So he combined both of them. Like, you can call them trips or you can call them a set. Even though, like, trips is when, you know, there's a pair on the board. And you got one of them. A set is when you got them in the pocket. A lot nastier.
Sure.
But yeah, so if you flop a set of trips, he was saying, don't check raise. He's like, don't check raise. Like, that lets them fold the overpair. He's like, lead into them and they'll raise you. And then you like 3-bet and then they feel like they can't get away. And a week later, I was playing up in Turkington, one of the first times I ever played cash share. And I flopped a set of trips and I bet into the guy and he raised me and it went exactly the way Doyle described it in the book. But it's like, that can just also happen, you know? But I guess it was true in the sense that, because it's like people maybe they were feeling more committed if they raised. I don't know. The point is, it was just such a bunch of fucking random stuff that people wrote. The people who won were the people who were good and could figure it out and had good intuition and had good sense and just had like a good, snap on how to play poker. Mm-hmm. And the writing was probably more helpful for like, don't be a fucking monkey when you're losing. Don't bring too much money to the game. I mean, that's where the real value probably was. I mean, because the strategy, it's like, what the fuck? Nobody knew what they were doing.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that probably the best theoretical content out there was by David Skolansky with the theory of poker. And looking back at that now, it's kind of an LOL situation. That was our theory basis and foundation in the 2000s. And you mentioned flopping your set of trips and you led. So there used to be we used to call this line a certain thing. It was called stack-a-donk. And what you would do is you would lead with a big hand, usually a set of trips, as you like to call it, and then they would raise you. You call, or they call you. Either way, you check turn and then shove all in. And it just seemed to work. You lead the flop, they call. You check the turn, and now they think you don't have anything. A little bit of deception just went so long back then. And then they raise you on the turn all in, and you just get it in. And you got to remember back then, you weren't really sitting in these deep stack cash games like we do now. You look at Hustler Casino, and quite frankly, it's just like watching a bunch of monkeys throw shit, if you ask me. You're not really watching high-level poker these days. It's mostly just a bunch of rich guys that are the whales that are playing infinitely deep. So it makes it exciting to watch million-dollar pots in that sense. But for an actual poker player, high-stakes poker, those were the guys. And you look back now and we're like, those were the guys? But they were the guys. And those were the professionals. And now the highest stake games are mostly recreationals and VIPs. The highest stakes games are generally built around the rec players. And it used to be kind of the inverse, where you had a ton of professionals with one or two recreational players. And it's just comical to me to think back on that time compared to where we are now. When you look at the highest stakes stream games, there's very few professionals in the lineups. I mean, not to say that none of these guys have poker talent. I'm not trying to take anything away from any of these guys. Alan Keating is exciting to watch, and he was a long-term poker pro before he became whatever the hell he is now. But he's very exciting to watch. He makes the game interesting. He's a great personality. I think he's fantastic for poker. But that's the biggest thing we're lacking nowadays, is these guys had personalities back then, and these were the professionals, the Mike Mattisals, Doyle with his hat. You got Chow Zhang wearing Doyle's room poker hats. There's this little Asian guy wearing Doyle's hat. You got Daniel Negreanu with like 15 different hair colors and his earring and his hockey jersey, telling everybody what they have but paying it off anyway. You got the magician, Antonio. You got Phil Locke, the Unabomber. I mean, these guys had nicknames, man. I mean, Kid Poker, Unabomber, the magician, it's like. And then you got the deadly guys. You got Phil Ivey, who just sits there with $1 million in cash in front of him and says 2 words, all in, and scares everybody every hand. So it was exciting. It hooked me. It hooked everyone around us. But the landscape of poker, you asked in the beginning, what does it look like out there? What do my binoculars tell me? And quite frankly, it's different. We're not in the same neighborhood anymore. We're not in Kansas anymore. And quite frankly, that's good and bad. Evolution is expected, and poker is ever evolving every month, every year, every decade. And it's no better or worse. Everyone, probably like music and movies from their era, think that they lived in the best times. I mean, I think a lot of these young Euro kids are probably super excited about poker the same way we were, because they don't know any better. They don't know what it was like to sit and get queens in on 6, 7, 8 for 200 big blinds and always have the nuts. Because nobody played 9-10 to a 3-bet. Nobody has 7-8 suited, and they just stacked off with 8. With 7, with 6s. They just didn't care, and it was a different era. Or you flop a set, you're always doubling up. Like, you get a set under set situation nowadays, it's like, oh my God, what a bad beat. You get a set under set situation in 2016, 2015, or as far back as 2008. I mean, you're probably crying for a week.
Yeah, I know. It does happen a lot more now because, well, it's not that it happens a lot more now. It's just that it's occupying a greater percentage of the all-ins set against set because people are not getting it in with these hands anymore. So if people are tightening up the hands they're going to get it in with, and then you have to also.
Yeah, absolutely. And ranges have expanded. People have learned that they can and should play more hands in certain situations, and also learned that they should fold more hands in other situations. So when you do see a showdown, it's often going to be a hand that you might not expect that's in there, but that hand's only showing down when it makes a very big hand to beat another hand. You're not seeing 7-4 suited stack off with a 7 for 200 big blinds in 2025.
Yeah, and I think if you're coming up in this era of poker, you have all the training information out there. It's so easy to avoid bad habits. Basically, you can become like a really sick player in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah, honestly, I fucking hate that.
I know. I mean,
it's a little bit of the old man syndrome to get off my lawn, but these kids today can learn stuff that it took me 15 years of trial and error to decipher and figure out on my own, all through running a couple of simulations in an hour or two. And again, it's a different skill set. The guys that run sims now and work with solvers, it's not to say that they're not strong in that skill set, but that's not what poker was. When I think of the game of poker, I'm thinking about psychological warfare. Like, I'm thinking you put yourself in another man's brain and you figure out what makes him tick. You decide how to get him, how to trigger him, how to induce him. You're using math, you're using logic, you're using psychology, and those things still exist in today's game. However, you do see it less and less in the mid-stakes. You see it more in maybe the 2-5 games that you're playing. It's a lot more exploitative game. And ironically, you see it in the bigger games. It's that mid-stake 5-10, 10-20, some of the 25-50 stuff, particularly the public games where these are the wizards, these are the solver guys. I mean, a 10-20-40 game at the Wynn Las Vegas in a live poker game is far tougher than most high-stakes games you see on Hustler Casino Live. The players are just infinitely more skilled in the actual game of poker. They might not have the bankrolls or the gamble in them, but they're more proficient with poker strategy and execution than any of those guys. So as you go up, it's kind of like this bell curve where you start off, with like the idiots, and then you go up and up and up, and everyone's getting better and better, and then you keep going, and everyone gets worse and worse and worse and worse. You end up with a couple of absolute killers and then a bunch of fantastic VIPs that make the game great.
No, it's true. It's like if you can actually just get enough money or get enough support and get enough connections, most importantly, to get yourself into those big games. It's like now you can it's like getting out of training camp, having to be in the mid-stakes games 5, 10, 10, 20 when you start to get the high stakes, because it's like the competition is like so tough. It's those are like the highest stakes games of like what you might think of as like sort of normal competitive poker versus getting into high stakes games, the real high stakes games, which are basically just private games in casinos now.
Yeah.
And and then you're playing against whales, and then you can like bring back the street fighting style of play. And like you said, it exists a whole lot more in 2-5. You're taking so many lines that are so exploitable. It's like, this size you're always bluffing, this size is always value, but he will never figure it out, so we're just going to make it that obvious, because as long as it's not obvious to him, then it's just going to print a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah. I mean, you're playing a game that's just full-on exploitation, and whoever can identify the opponent's weaknesses and exploit them faster is going to get the money. It's not to say there isn't a good foundation to be had for understanding some theory. Obviously, even like recreational players and VIPs, there's so much content out there today that recreational players have access to free content on YouTube and newsletters and emails and things. So they're picking up things. These guys are very intelligent people, and that's something that for decades I feel people have just not understood. These guys make the games because they don't give a fuck about the money. And they don't give a fuck about the money because they're incredible titans in their craft. They have the ability to go to the casino and dump money that we're grinding our asses off for to make our rent because they're bored and because they're sick of blackjack or they don't want to go to the Rhino tonight and they chose poker. And that's why I've always had this mentality personally. As a poker player, it's somewhat our obligation as professionals to make this environment good for them. So, on one hand, I do miss the days where it's kind of like the best man for the job. You're the best player, you get into the best games, you win the most money. We're not in that stage anymore. The best players don't make the most money in live poker anymore. Maybe that's still the case online. I've been pretty disconnected from the true online landscape for quite some time now. Obviously, there's some incredible Europeans that play online, both cash games and tournaments. But that's just a completely different world than live poker when you're looking at, the Texas Card House streams or the Lodge streams or the Hustler Casino streams or, watching all of these, as I said before, monkeys throw shit. And what I mean by that is you just have all these guys with money piling money in, not knowing what they're doing. And the fun of that is because it's $1 million. If we watched that exact same game at 2-5 stakes, no one would be interested in watching it. The personalities, there's a few, but I would say most of them don't really exist. I think that in some of the private games, here in Las Vegas, you got several private games, and basically there's personalities in all of them. Some of them are pros, some of them are recreational players, and it's the people that can network, as you said, their way into the games, but also provide an aura about themselves that is fun but competitive. You create a dynamic with a recreational player where you want to beat them and they want you to try, but they're having fun while you take their money. And there's no hard feelings either way. So, you can't get too upset after you lose a pot. You can't get personal with the player. You can't be mad at them, and vice versa. The best games are where everyone has a good camaraderie and they kind of know each other, or they create that environment for a new guy that just steps in. You want to walk into your local casino, into that game, and feel like you've known these boys for 10 years and you go to a barbecue together. That's the environment that people should create, and that's the environment I like to try and create when I'm in games. It's just a different world.
Yeah, look, when you go to the strip club, the girl's supposed to come over to you. She's supposed to butter you up and try and actually sell the image to you that she might actually be into you in some subtle way. She's supposed to show you a good time. She's not supposed to get out of line. Neither are you. You give them money, and everyone goes home happy. And I guess, it's just kind of like that for these whales or whoever they are with a lot of money coming into poker games. They want to play against people. It's like I want you to provide me with poker entertainment, and I know I don't mind giving $20,000 to you to give me that, because some people, it's like I feel like I'm sure a lot of the pros are like jealous of them in the way is they get to just enjoy the game full on, just like you and I did when we first learned how to play it, without getting stressed out really about anything. I mean, it's like if you bluff them or whatever, they're not going to fucking be sick with themselves for days about it. I mean,
right.
The whole point of me, when I have something really sick happen to me, the best thing for me to do is just go out and play again and find something else to get pissed off about, so that I stop thinking about this. Because it's just a never-ending fucking cycle when you're something of a perfectionist and you're too hard on yourself. And, I've been really hard on myself all these years. I used to be a lot worse. It put me in fucking therapy. But we see these people, and we still think the same thing when we first took up playing. It was like, I am so much fucking better than you at this shit. And it just feels like any mistake is just inexcusable and unacceptable. And how the fuck could I have ever done this even one time against this asshole?
Yeah. I think you need that in poker. I think you need that delusion to think that you're better than people. And I mean, for the first 10, 12 years of my career, even when I was playing smaller than other guys, I'd look over at the bigger tables and be like, I'm better than that motherfucker. Yeah. I would always wonder what guys' hourlies were, and I'd be like, man, is that guy really better than me, or is he just ran better or had more money? And the truth is, it's a combination. You don't really know. Variance is a motherfucker, and you really don't know variance until you see the cold-blooded redness of it. And if you're in this game long enough and you're in the betting world, every one of us sees it. And every player, when they're on a downswing and experiencing the negative variance, we all think that we're the unluckiest player in the world. And when we're on the upside and we're running hot, we all think we're the kingpin shit. And we think that our shit doesn't stink and that we can take you out back anytime we want and bury you in the desert, and we just choose to allow you to exist around us because we're the king. And it's just an interesting situation where you can feel so confident and smart at something and so stupid and dumb at something all in the same week, sometimes in the same day. And I kind of love it about that. It's that push-pull, you feel a certain way about the game and you're like, I hate this. Why am I still in this game? Why am I playing poker? I should go get a job as an accountant, or man, I should play more. I should move up. I should go play the bigger game. I'm ready for the bigger game, and it's just this like tug of war back and forth with your ego and your insecurities and confidence. And that's what makes it great. And this is like from a professional, point of view. And as you get more into where recreationals and VIPs think, I think they just want to come and have a good time, and they want to enjoy characters. I wish there were more characters again. I love guys that, Helmuth gets a lot of shit, and I have given him my fair share of shit. However, the guy is a legend because he's a character. The poker brat, the branding he's done. This guy gets into games. Now, I don't know if he's actually beating these games, but he's playing with the Shamats of the world. He's playing with, the Jason Kilikanakis, or however the hell you say that guy's name, who's got a lot more money than everyone else. So you can say whatever the fuck he wants. But he's in games where he doesn't need to be good, and he still wins money, maybe. But either way, he gets access to their brains, he gets access to their games, he gets access to being around them because he's a character. And Negreanu, same thing, like love him or hate him, the guy is a character, Guys like, Chino, who's a legend, and I've had the chance to play with him over the last several months a lot. Chino's somebody that is fun and great for games, and he is somebody who brings a lot of personality and just like street, that raw dog, like get in the mix, bulldog experience. And, there's young guys that are like that. Don't get me wrong. You come across them and you just have so much respect. They're what we call like an old soul. They're young guys that are 22, 23, and you're like, you know what? You could have played 10 years ago. You would have been good. And then there's some guys where it's like, brother, if there wasn't a solver involved, I don't know if you could even find the poker room. Like, you might. So it's like, it's such an interesting dynamic these days, and I do miss the characters. And, you do have a few, but I would like to see more of that. And you do get more of that in the private scene. You do get more of that in the bigger stakes scene. And it's our obligations as professionals or regulars in those games to make that environment welcoming where people can be themselves. They can say funny things and not feel like they have to be PC. They can be themselves and, wear whatever the hell they want. If they have a stupid looking jacket, there's a guy named Tom Schneider who used to play in Arizona. He's got 4 bracelets, I want to say. He won Player of the Year one year. I'm in the photo. I'm in one of his bracelet photos. I'm serious.
I know about Tom Schneider, sure.
He used to wear these just insanely goofy jackets and like outfits, and the guy just looks like he walks in and it's like, what the hell? This guy's a VIP. The guy's got like 4 bracelets and Player of the Year and won a bunch of tournaments and for a long time made money in poker. I mean, seems like he's moved on from poker now, but he was a personality. He wears clothes that are funny and like something people notice, and I miss that. I miss the characters.
Yeah, I guess as the strategies got more and more serious and the understanding of the game got more and more serious, so too did the personalities who began to dominate at it, and you get fewer and fewer of those people. And I guess like just back in the day when it was just such a fucking circus that it was like people weren't even able to bother about strategy, so that you could just show up, dress goofy, act goofy or whatever, and it worked.
Yeah.
I was listening to one of Doug Polk's shows last year, and I think they were going over maybe the top 10 players of all time, or people were giving their who they think the number one is. I mean, they went through a whole bunch of names, but most of these names were people that no one's even heard of. It's like these
Right.
amazing European players.
Yeah.
And I'm not like discrediting any of them, but it's like
Sure.
you can't call the best player in the world no one has even heard of. It's almost like the character actually plays a part of that.
Well, when you don't know the real name of OTB Red Baron, or when you don't know the names of some of these online, like we don't even know their real name. It's kind of like back in the day, Isildur won. No one knew who this guy was for 3 years, and he battled the highest stakes. I mean, he was playing Ivy and Durr and Antonius and Hastings and all these guys, and he ended up just being the Swedish guy that had some crazy hair, Victor Blom, who was just like a psychopath on the felt. And once you knew who he was, the allure was kind of gone, It was that was exciting. So the online days were also more fun back in the day, I feel. And although I was more of a live player, I did dabble online. I definitely remember watching all the online games. I remember battling with some of the Full Tilt Red Pros and the Limit games even back then, and the No Limit games. And just watching, the sidelines were fun. You just go on and you could watch a high stakes game with all these legends online with their avatars, and it was just a fun time back then. And I think the private scene, it is what it is. Unfortunately, that's what the game is gravitated to, which makes it's unfortunate because it makes the mid stakes games lesser. 5-10 and 10-20 in your local casinos, or even here in Las Vegas, are just becoming obsolete. It's basically the nosebleeds. You got Bobby's Room, you got Table 1, and the game I play regularly, which is Table 6 at Aria, is just a lot of fun. And the VIPs want to go to a game where the hosts treat them well. They feel welcomed. They feel like they can sit down and have a good time, and they don't feel like they're being chased by a bunch of piranhas or vultures circling around them. They just want a good experience, and it's up to us to provide that for them. And, the good news is you don't even have to be an incredible poker player anymore to get in these games. You can just be an entertaining person that's likable and fun and gives action, and the nits, and I don't mean a nit, but someone talking about what their pre-flop RFI ranges are. I'm talking about the nits that don't give anything to the game. They only take things out. A better word would be leech, because they're not providing anything to the game. And poker is something that we all owe something to if we've been in the game long enough. The game gave us a lot, whether it was heartache and pain or glory. And I do feel like it's up to us if you're in that scene, and the way to get into the private scene is to definitely provide entertainment, provide camaraderie, and provide an environment where people can have fun and feel like they can relax.
And it's really amazing to really be able to do that and at the same time play poker and play hard and play focused and play like this is the final table of the World Series, and
sure.
You're not fucking off anything. And when I play, I mean, if I'm high, I'm a little more talkative. If there's people at the table that I like, which there usually isn't, I will be a little bit more talkative. I mean, 9 out of 10 times someone who I know sits down in the game, I think, oh, this fucking asshole is here. I mean, it's like, I'm miserable, but I'm not, but I am, but I'm not. Like, I'm basically fine, but it's just like, I just don't really make an effort with any of these jerk-offs who play 2-5, because you don't really have to. I mean, if I was really wanting to play higher again and needing to, be a little bit more, enjoyable to be around, I think I could probably get myself to do it, but it's, I guess, I don't know. I guess the ship has sailed or whatever, and I'm not that interested, and I'm just maintaining being a one-trick pony, but, I guess it's all right as long as you're good at the trick.
Yeah. When I think about you playing poker and I imagine walking into a room, when I imagine myself walking into a poker room and looking and seeing you at a table, or even when I listen to your podcast, I always listen and hear the Larry David theme song music from Curb Your Enthusiasm. And I just imagine that playing as I look over at you. And I just wonder, who is he pissed off at today? What story is he going to have? like what one of these menaces at the table pissed Dan off today. I walk up and I see you turn around and you give me this look like you're buried, but you're actually winning. And it's just kind of like I hear that da 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 da, and it's just it brings joy to me to.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story. This Indian player who comes in from out of town, and I'm describing him as Indian just to paint a fucking picture so people will have a fucking idea, okay? He's like a competent player. He doesn't seem to be that aggressive, but he knows what he's doing, and he probably wins, right? Mm-hmm. Then he wins a big pot. Then all of a sudden, he starts making these strange sounds at the table. Like, I'm not kidding. That's about what it sounded like. Like, every, couple of minutes, or maybe a little bit more frequent than that, like different varying intervals, but never too far apart, like just making these peculiar sounds. And then, out of nowhere, he said something racist to the guy he just beat the big pot out of, this Asian-looking guy. He called him, like, Dr. Chan. He's like, Dr. Chan, when can I get an appointment? And Dr. Chan, maybe that is his name. It'd be funny if that was his real name, but... And
it's probably 30%.
Yeah, all right, let's assume that it was. Let's assume that it is. So Dr. Chan looked at me. I've been playing with him recently. And I looked at him. I just shrugged my shoulders. I was like, I don't know. He's just been making some strange noises ever since he won that hand. And then this guy looks at me. He's like, you. He's like, you are the most miserable fucking person I ever played poker with. He's like, whether you have chips, you're an asshole. If you don't have chips, you're an asshole. He's like, you're always telling people when it's their turn. And the whole time, I was just busting up laughing when he said it. I wasn't offended. I'm laughing because I'm thinking, like, how many other people are thinking this? Because he felt like I provoked him, so that's why he said it. But it's like, normally I don't really provoke anybody, but I find myself getting instigated with a lot. So it is probably just people who I am just... I mean, I know there's people who I'm just slowly pissing them off one way or another, even though I'm not really doing anything.
You're just Larry Daving it. You're just being you. It's just like... Da, 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 da.
Like,
and I mean,
we're surrounded by jackasses, and I don't make an effort to think that I think anything else.
That's great.
Yeah, so I don't have as hard a time as making enemies as I do friends. But you were talking about the personalities before, about like Chino Ream and Alan Keating, and I've played a few times with Chino, just a few, and I know what you mean. Like there was a certain thing about his personality and his character that just really like stood out to you, and it just, regardless of his whatever he does off the table, all the things you hear about Chino Ream, it's like when you're playing with him, it was a very unique thing to experience. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Alan Keating as well. I played 1020 with Alan back in the day, and you could see how talented Alan was, and I think that's what would get him so tilted is like, sometimes 5-10 players will play like 2-5 or 1-3 and they get extremely tilted if they're losing at it. I think Alan was feeling that way about 10-20 because he feels like he should be playing much higher and winning, playing the way he does. Instead, he's like, having to just go through life at 10-20, which even though back in the day it was still a lot softer than it is now, 10-20 still had a lot of tough players in it, and it's still a very difficult game to just beat. But Alan was another one. I mean, playing with Alan, it's like his personality and just his way of being at the table, it made sense that he went on to go be this high-stakes player, because it's like, it's not just having skills and know-how. There's something about you, especially when you're playing live poker, because you're not playing online. The guys who are sitting around there and clicking, I mean, they're mad geniuses, these guys, but they don't seem to really care to want to be on these high-stakes televised games, because if they wanted to be, they probably would be. I mean, they're doing what they want to do, and who cares?
To be frank, we don't want to watch them because like they're probably autistic or just very little personality, because they spend all their time immersed into learning about the game.
Yeah, right. So, something I wanted to ask from before. I think I heard this once about tournaments. This is the World Series, and everybody here comes down ready to pants everybody at tournaments, and almost everybody goes home infuriated, tilted, everyone is the unluckiest piece of shit in the world. Everybody, right? Every single one. I mean, is it true that it takes 5,000 tournaments to have a legitimate sample of live multi-table tournaments? Because I thought I heard something like that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with live poker tournaments is you're never really going to get a proper sample, in my opinion, of what someone's true ROI is. You know, you hear all about the markup that people charge nowadays. Well, markup is supposed to be based on ROI. It's not supposed to be your gas money for the rental car in Las Vegas, but that's kind of what it's evolved into. Like, well, I got to travel to Vegas. I got to get a room. I got to get a hooker. I mean, what am I supposed to use to spend on that? But the reality is markup should be based on your return of investment in the field. And that's a really hard thing to determine. Online, it was much easier because it was calculated for us, for one. You would just look at your stats on something like SharkScope, and I think some of the sites actually had their actual ROIs in tournaments and buy-ins, ABIs, average buy-in, on each individual site. And either way, you're just not sure. You know, even some of the best people in the world at trying to identify these things are Ike Haxton, Derek Walters, who just did a podcast recently about investing in tournament players, which was quite interesting. These guys are just making estimations. You know, you really have to play a large sample, and by large, I mean, probably 5,000 games. And online, that's achievable, but in live poker, if you're a full-time tournament grinder, some of these guys do put in insane volume. I mean, I do play a fair share of tournaments, especially the last 2 to 3 years. I just kind of had this itch of the competition. You know, you don't get the same thing in cash. And quite frankly, my son calls me a loser for not winning him a trophy. So I told him I'd eventually win him a trophy. And he asks me every time if I go play a tournament, he's like, did you win me a trophy? And I'm like, no, I didn't win you a trophy. But here's a picture of my friend that won one. And so I just, my last friend that won a tournament, a big tournament at the Wynn, I actually held the trophy and had him take a picture of me and then showed it to my son. And he's like, you won. And I'm like, nah, that wasn't mine. And I just think that 100 to 200 bullets a year, which is probably the average of most of these guys. I mean, look, some of these guys play 400 live bullets a year, which is insanity. They're at 5 venues every day during the summer. They're at the Aria playing the 1100 Mystery Bounty. They're at the Horseshoe firing out the 1500 or the 400 Colossus. And then they're over at the Venetian Late Reg in the 600 Deep Stack. And then they're finishing the night off in the Wynn Turbo. And at the end of the day, they got 7 pieces of paper with nothing to show for it. And, that's not to say that's everyone, right? Because there are winners, just like there are losers, but there's just a much larger amount of people that are going to go home unhappy. And quite frankly, even when you get second in a tournament, you're not happy. You're really only happy when you win a tournament. But why do we all chase this golden carrot? Well, the reality is there's really no better feeling in poker. Winning a poker tournament is the end-all be-all. That is the feeling we all chase. There's nothing as euphoric, there's nothing as high-flying as winning a tournament where you beat every single player. You got every chip in the field. You know what I mean? It's just nothing like it. The feeling you get. And the money is obviously great. And, that's why we all kind of do it at first. But it kind of turns into a bit of glory. I don't think I really play tournaments to make money, because if I did, I'd have a lot more money. Because I certainly haven't won any big tournaments. I've won tournaments before, but they're not anything large to where it's put me as like a 7-figure winner. And that's kind of what I'm chasing. But realistically, I'm probably better suited playing cash games. I'm probably better suited, firing a few tournaments a year, but I just got the itch. I want to chase some validation.
I think having notoriety at something like poker is going to feel extremely badass, because when I first learned the rules to poker, I thought this is the most badass game in the world to be good at, and that's how I got hooked. And when you get to the end of the tournament, I mean, it's like the funny thing about cash games is just like there's no beginning and there's no end. It's just all middle. You have the
one
beginning.
Giant session.
Yeah, it's like you have day-by-day sessions and all that and different games and everything, but it's just like you came in and you left. The tournament has like a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when you get to the end and it's just you, that's got to feel pretty fucking excellent. I mean, I came in second once in a tournament. It was just one of the Win Classics back in the day where I was playing for a trophy that I almost won and I guess presumably would not have given to the son I most likely don't have. But had I won, I mean, I was so close to winning. I had her all in for the win. She was pregnant, so it wasn't really fair because it was 2 against 1. But I had her all in for the win, and she won, and then she won the tournament, and I'm just like...
And she gave the trophy to her child.
Yeah, I mean, she won like 2,000 extra, and I was just like, I felt so robbed, and I felt so dejected. I mean, I was like happy I won some money.
Sure.
It was like 60 fucking people.
Right.
I wanted to win this goddamn tournament. I mean, it would have been fucking awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about that, too, is when you win a tournament, like I said, there's no feeling like it. And that just lasts for a few days. And then it kind of just wears off. And you're like, okay, time to play the next tournament. And, for some of these guys, man, some of these guys are sickos. They win a tournament. They'll win a bracelet and then go hop in another tournament. I heard Joe McKeon, who won the 2015 main event, I believe, a month later was in a $400 Borgata deep stack. And that's just because he loves it. I mean, you wouldn't tell by looking at him. He always looks miserable at the table. You two could be, partners in crime.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
But you just got to love the game, man. Like, you win the main event, and a month later, you're in a $400 tournament where the winner is going to be less than the buy-in you just paid for that tournament.
Yeah, speaking of the main event, so with Helmuth refusing to play, claiming it's too long an event and everything, I mean, it's a pretty interesting point, especially for someone his age.
Sure. So when that came out, I had some conversations with people about that, and I actually kind of agree with Phil. I would change a few things to where, ironically, my solution for this would not to be to make the main event shorter, but it would be to make the main event longer. And what that means is we're already there for 2 weeks, if you're lucky enough. And what's the big deal in adding an extra day off after day 5 or day 6? And everyone could use it. The last 2 years, I've been very fortunate to have some very close friends get deep in the main event. 3rd place finish and a 4th place finish last year and in 2023. And I was on the rail in both of those, so I kind of got to follow along in the journey and be part of that experience. There was also another time in 2012 where I was on the rail, as you might know, with Jake Balsinger's rail. And for those of you that don't know, just a quick story with that. Dan's biggest main event run was in 2012, and on day 3, I believe it was,
Yep.
They're deep in the main. They're near the money, and Dan flops a set and gets it all in on the flop versus Jake on a king-high board, and Jake has a pair of kings. Dan's got a set of 3s, and Jake goes runner to make a bigger full house. Jake goes on to get 3rd place in the main for, I want to say, about $3.8 million. Dan, what did you finish that year?
I came in 371st place, which, I think the gross was around 33,000, which sounds like a lot, but it feels like nothing looking up at 8.5 fucking million. And when I heard a bunch of Vegas locals were making deep runs, I think there were 4 guys from Vegas at that final table.
That was an incredible series. Yeah.
So I show up, and there's 2 tables left because I'm hearing about all these guys are there. And I show up, and that fucking kid who fucking went runner on me just a few days ago is still in the fucking tournament. I mean, his whole fucking life changed with that hand.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy because when you watch like a main event final table or any tournament final table, you don't really understand the journey that got that player there. Every single person that gets to that table ran extremely hot in some capacity.
Yeah, and just to give this bad beat a little bit more context, if I had won that pot in like the early part of day 3, I would have been like chip leader or easily top 5. And, you're a long way to go from the money even, and never mind the latter stages. But you, at this point, are in the driver's seat. And I would not have been too fucking reckless. It was my first ever main event tournament, but I was extremely patient throughout that whole thing. Every time I was about to do something stupid, I would stop myself and not do it. because it was the main event and there was just another level of focus going on. And then Jake puts this beat on me. I mean, and,
that's brutal.
And ESPN, was around the area. Thank God they missed it. They would have put that on TV a million times because they're looking for stuff like that.
You don't got to tell me about ESPN, buddy.
Oh, we won't go there just yet.
Oh boy.
So, you don't get your money in as a 95% favorites. I mean, in a tournament, it's fucking impossible.
Yeah.
And that big of a pot, that big of a favorite, and that significant of an event. I mean, oh God, when I was paying off that pot, I wasn't tilted. I wasn't angry. I just remember feeling sad. I was just I can't believe it. I was like, and I was thinking I've just got my head resting on my hand. I was like, what did I do in the past? How many times did I fuck up in the past that it was worthy of the variance? I was like, I must have deserved this. I was like, this is too freaky of a hand to lose for me to have not deserved in some way. Because look, I mean, I was fucking young in my fucking 20s. Everyone in their 20s plays like a fucking moron.
Yeah.
I would get tilted and start moving up in stakes, but I would be spazzy, but there was still a certain amount of control, so I wasn't just completely blasting, but I was doing. I know I got away with a lot of stupid things, and after that hand, I was just like, that has to be payback for something. I was like,
well, that's
why would I was like, why else would I lose that hand? How do you lose a hand?
And this is kind of what we talked about earlier with the sample size thing. I mean, these MTT guys go through hands like that on both sides all the time. Now, when I say all the time, that's not just any hand. It's the main event. It's the biggest stage. It's a huge pot. And that hand doesn't exist every tournament. But it probably does exist every tournament to somebody. Not each person, but one person in every poker tournament takes a beat like that. Which means one person in every poker tournament puts a beat on somebody like that. Look at the distinction in the different paths that those created. You go on to cash for $33K respectively in your first main. Jake goes on to win $3.8 million, I think it was. It might have been more. I don't even remember. I was on the rail, but it was such a long three-handed match. I got drunk and sobered up and got drunk again and sobered up before it ended. I just know that if Jake had won, he would have been the youngest main event winner ever at the time. This kid's 21 playing 1-2 no limit or spread limit at that in Arizona at an Indian reservation casino. And 3 months later, he's at the final table of the main event playing for $9 million and the bracelet to be the youngest player ever. So that beat he put on you changed his life. I mean, he just busts out. And who knows if he ever even plays the main event again? That's the thing. And we all have these different trajectories that tournaments really seem to spin us in different ways. I want to say that a longtime friend, Cy Watson, lost a flip to Merson. Greg Merson went on to win that main event in 2012. And Cy Watson and Greg played a big flip with 15 or 20 people left. And if Cy won, he might have been the guy to win the main event. Instead, he fizzled out and got a nice score for six figures, but didn't win the main. Greg went on to win the main, become a legend, and obviously all that money changes everything. It gives you opportunities and freedom. So, tournaments are sickening, but, for every downside, it's there's the upside. What if you're Jake? What if you're the guy that wins the flip? I mentioned in the opening that I lost a flip the other night to Stone Bubble a tournament. The difference was not cashing and being the very last person to not cash and going into day two, fourth of 200 and something in chips, which the winner was $275K and you're guaranteed a couple thousand. I would have got a couple of my 5 buy-ins back. So minimum, I walk away only a small loser. Maximum, I walk away with a condo. And instead, I walked away with 5 pieces of paper. And that's just the pain of tournaments, but we just come back.
I think because you've been in it so long, you feel like you got to really get it now. I never got that heavily into tournaments. Yeah. Which, and look, I didn't get that heavily into them because this, 90% glass empty perspective on it is just, I had that very early on. I was just like, cash is more interesting. It's just better for your emotional EV. And cash is hard enough, okay?
Yeah.
You go months at a time where it's just like, God, can I just play one significant pot without having an excruciating tough decision to make?
Yeah.
Even if I go on to win the hand, I still lost so much value because once again it comes runner bullshit and it just fucks up everything. It's so many things have to go well just to win a big pot. And, cash is going to deject the hell out of you. Even if you're crushing, it's going to deject the hell out of you. So tournaments, though, I mean,
the beautiful thing about a cash game is you lose a pot like that, because of course that beat, we've all taken and given that beat in our careers in some capacity. But the difference is that you reload and you hit the reset button, and the next hand, you start from scratch and you're immediately back at 200 big blinds or 300 big blinds or whatever, and nothing's really changed except you're a little lighter in the wallet. Whereas in a tournament, you lost a significant portion of your stack, which means that your particular entry is now worth less. In a cash game, when you rebuy, you're worth the same. Whatever the chips put in front of you, that's their cash value, to a degree, of course, skill not pending. But in tournaments, Jake went from being out, like literally out, to getting third place. And, this isn't like a let's shit on Jake thing, because we've all put those beats on people. I have put some sick beats on people in tournaments too. We always like to remember the bad beats, but we've all put the bad ones onto others. And I think what it is, though, is the fact that can happen. It's kind of degenerate, and I think that's why I mess with it. And, you mentioned I've been in it for so long. Yeah, I do kind of feel like like everyone else, I feel like I've ran a little bit unlucky in the biggest spots in my career. I've had some pretty big opportunities in tournaments. I didn't play a lot of tournaments until the last 3-4 years, which ironically I did much better in them from a financial standpoint up until then. When I just played low volume in tournaments, my first 10, 11 years full time, I won a lot in tournaments relative to like what I played for. You know what I mean? My biggest score is 120K, so I'm not some sicko. But what I mean by that is I didn't play very many buy-ins, and I would just win. I had profitable years, and I was telling a friend of mine the other day while we were talking about poker, and I told him in tournaments, I think I've had losing tournament summers like 5 out of the last 7 that I've played, and those are probably my top 7 volume tournament summers. So does that mean like, okay, well, you put in more volume, it shows you're a losing tournament player, you just got lucky early on? Yeah, maybe. Or maybe none of this matters because this is nothing close to 5,000 bullets or 10,000 bullets or whatever you need. We don't know the exact number. I think it was Sean Deeb did some kind of a study or something showing that was the amount of games that was needed. And online, you can find that kind of volume. In live tournaments, certain spots don't come up, and sometimes they come up in different buy-in levels. Like, you might run incredibly hot in the New Orleans nightly. You're at the Orleans in the $200 buy-in and you run super hot and win 9K, but then you run like dick in the main event to bust on the bubble or, in the big spot at the final table where all the ICM implications are into play. So there's a lot of variance that nobody really even realizes or can't control,
Right. The variance, you have your variance like pyramid, but you have all these little sub-pyramids. You have 5,000 tournaments at the Orleans Nightly, 5,000 main events, 5,000 1Ks. You're not going to get to 5,000 all of those unless you clone yourself a bunch of times. But the more I think about it, hearing it again, I'm like, yeah, I just don't want to do this. I was like, I don't want to put my life into something knowing that I either might not get what I deserve or might get what I deserve and me not realize I never deserved very much to begin with because I'm not playing nearly as well as I think. In cash, there's so much more like certainty. It's like if I play cash, I play for thousands of hours over a bunch of years. And, you figure I'm going to get a little better during each year as well. But even if I don't, it's like I'm going to get what I deserve. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less.
Sure.
It's not going to be the difference between paying rent or having a fucking mansion. And that just seems like, and maybe it just goes hand in hand with like why I don't play in these big games with all the stand-up game, bomb pots, just all the crazy shit that I'm just like, I just want to play poker, Like I'm not quite like the internet nerds, but I like it nice and contained. So I wouldn't, if I was coming up in today's era, I would never be in the high stakes games. Because when I played 10-20, we had 2 blinds. We paid time every half hour. We had a list. Nobody fucked with the list. And nobody complained. And that was it. And there were no private games at Wales and this and that. You got to know this guy. You got to have this personality. There was none of that.
The good old days.
The good old days, yeah.
Good old days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned with tournaments, I might finally catch that glory that that you're chasing. And I think that there's a very real possibility that's what happens. Like, I do think that if I continue to play tournaments somewhat regularly in the next few years, that I will get one to go my way. Now, that all being said, that might just get me unstuck for the last couple of years. I might finally win one for $350K, and it's like, congratulations, you just earned $12 an hour over the last 6 years in tournaments. And, at least my son gets that trophy, but I might realize that all this validation I was chasing and all this glory and just that feeling of euphoria was all for nothing, because I might catch it in that big one and then I don't even feel fulfilled. I think there's a real possibility of that.
Well, have you heard of the hedonic treadmill, that concept?
No.
Well, it's literally like a treadmill. I mean, like, the simplest example is it's just like you want to buy a certain house. You already own a house, but you want a bigger house. Mm-hmm. Then you get that really big house. And you're very happy about it at first. Then after a few months, it just wears off. You don't care anymore. And now you just want the next biggest house.
Sure.
So it's like a treadmill.
Okay.
And you just go in the same spot. And it's like, like all the spirituality books I read. I mean, it's like we're all trying to get this amazing accomplishments done on the outside because we think that's what's going to make us feel like saved and great. And it is worth something. I mean, you think about your poker career. I'm proud of a lot of things I've done in my poker career. It does give me a lot of something that's good.
Sure.
But it's at the end of the day, it's like, it's not even about this. It's just not even about what you pick in from the outside, because it's like, once you get it, you're like, where's the special feeling? It's underwhelmed. You find yourself being underwhelmed.
Sure.
Even though, like, you're glad you're not chasing it anymore. It's you do feel like you're still gonna feel like you're better off than where you were, because hey, at least you got it now. But it's like, wow, you're like, I spent my whole life going after this. It's like, this is all it was really worth.
I think it's kind of like playing a video game. It's kind of like, you play Mario when you're a kid and you're bouncing through every level and every land, and finally you meet the end boss and it's Bowser, and you get there and you maybe don't beat him right away. Maybe it takes a few tries, and then finally you beat him and you learn how to beat him, and you're like, that wasn't so hard. Like, you just bounce on his head a few times and he dies. What's my reward? This ungrateful princess that comes up to me and judges me for being a plumber? Like, fuck her, bro. Like, no, I mean, but what I'm saying is it's kind of like a goal to have to give us purpose, something to do, and, nowadays a lot of my purpose lies in having my son and being a dad. And I have found less fulfillment in poker and in tournaments in the last 2 years. I have played less poker, and it feels good. It makes me appreciate the times I do play poker. Tournaments are something where I feel like all of us at the beginning of the summer, we're like, it's going to be a great summer. We're excited. And then week 2 or 3, we're 5, 10, 15, 20 bullets in. We got one min cash and a bunch of slips of paper that are tax write-offs. And we're annoyed and we're disgruntled, and the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme song is bouncing in all of our heads. And yeah, we're just like, why the hell did we do this to ourselves? And then at the end of summer camp, as everyone calls it, we'll see you next year. But like, it's fun every few months to just fire up a tournament, especially a fun one. The main event is fairly special because it's got this different dynamic and feel to it. There's a few tournaments a year that are like that. But yeah, most of these things, like, I couldn't be a full-time tournament grinder. I do play a lot of them now, and a lot of that's because in Vegas, there's just so many now. And it's, it's a Wednesday, and like, I could watch like the basketball game, or I can go flick a bullet into this $1,100 bird, and maybe I get that good run of variance I've been waiting 15 years for, and I can get unstuck, But the reality is most of the time you're gonna walk away disappointed.
Yeah, I know. The first tournament I played in 12 years, in the last 12 years, I have bought into no tournaments. I was free roll to play a tournament 4 years ago, and I got knocked out right before dinner, and I was more tilted from that than from any cash game session that I had in the previous 8 years where I didn't play any tournaments. So it's just, I mean, look, this is the realism. People show up everyone can't wait to become a champion. Everyone thinks they're going to become a champion. And then 2-3 weeks later, it's a fucking nightmare for almost everybody.
It's funny you say that. I say that all the time. I am so much more like the other night, I stone cold bubbled that tournament. We finished at like 140, or I finished at 140. They finished at 141. But I was more tilted over that 1100 loss than a $30,000 loss a week earlier in the cash game I play. I was more tilted because I was there, man. I was right there, and I had the chips, and I was in a flip for the chip lead, and I wasted all that time and all that energy for no reason. And that hurts so much more than grinding a cash session, because at least in cash, you just come back the next day and you'll just win it back, because you're going to win 55 to 70% of the time in cash games, and in tournaments, you're only going to cash about 10 to 20% of the time.
No, I know. It's like what few chances you actually get, and then you just come up short because of fucking more variance. It feels very unsatisfying. And I thought a little bit about the main event this year. I mean, it's like you said. I fucking thought about it. But, it's 12 fucking 13 hours every day, and I know this is going to affect me at some point. And I right now I'm thinking more about that. So it's just not something that's very likely to happen. I mean, I've been thinking about just poker, why I even bother to keep playing. I mean, it's like a lot of players would like to get up, but they don't really know what to get into.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where I'm at. I mean, I feel like, and this is a good thing, okay? I feel like I've achieved just about everything I can think of that I really wanted to achieve. Like, do it for this many years, hit this kind of round number at this game. I mean, it's like,
sure.
I mean, now it's just about, I mean, it's not that I don't get excited to play. I am excited to play when I go in there. And there's just something about the feeling that never gets old of when the table at some point, sooner or later, just becomes aware of your table presence, becomes aware of who you are, what you're trying to do, what you're capable of doing, and you get excited if you see they're getting scared of you, and you get even more excited if they think, ooh, they want a piece of you, because they think they're gonna have an edge on you, and you're probably gonna have one on them.
I mean, I wouldn't know anything about that, but
yeah, I mean, so it's just, I just like going in there and just beating the fuck out of people at this stupid cat and mouse game. It just doesn't get old. Just leveling people, making them scared, making them wonder, making them tilted, just making them every miserable emotion you can make them. I mean, it's. I feel like to a degree that's how it's got to be. I mean, you just want to fuck people up.
Yeah, I think if you don't maintain that killer instinct to a degree, then it's time to hang it up, and I've actually given a lot of thought the last year and a half to hanging it up at poker. Some of that was because I started playing this private game pretty regularly about 10 months ago, and I was losing quite often for a while in the game. I was, and people would ask me how the game is, and I'm like, it's great, but I'm not referring to my results. I'm referring to the game. The game is good, but I was losing for quite some time. I mean, I just got unstuck in this game, recently. And I do think the earning potential is there in the game. It's also just a fun environment. I don't think I could go in 3 days a week. That's another thing. I don't have to play 7 days a week anymore. I don't want to play 7 days a week anymore. I have a lot of fulfillment and purpose in being a father now, and a lot of responsibility with that. And, like you mentioned, I do some sports betting and some things in sports, and that takes my attention away at times. So I get to kind of use poker as an outlet, and I do think less is more in a lot of ways. Garrett Adelstein, who was a great high stakes live regular on Live at the Bike and Hustler Casino for many years, he was a full-time grinder long before that. And I remember him saying that when he started playing less, he enjoyed it more, and he could get that competitive juice flowing more, and I really think that the less you have to play, the more you want to play. And I think that's necessary. You need to go in with that mentality. If you go in and you're just going through the motions, you might still win as a robot, but you don't want to get caught up in poker purgatory, where you're one of these guys where the game's passed you by and you don't know what else to do. And now you don't really have the means because you're not keeping up with the Joneses. You know, you're not willing to study the solvers, or you're not willing to put the work in to get better, or you're just not able to do it, one or the other. And if that happens, you find yourself where you got to move down in stakes. You got to start protecting your bankroll. You got to change your lifestyle. And that leads to a lot of miserable people. You know, you see a lot of guys that used to play big games still stuck in poker because they don't have anything better to do, whether it's lack of family or purpose, or it's just they don't have another skill, you know? So you mentioned, like, I don't know what else I would do. And I think that's the key, is all the greats seem to get out at the top or towards the top. They tend to kind of disappear, you know, when you kind of least expect it. You expect, like, wow, this guy got out of poker. And, you know, it's like, oh, well, he got into crypto. Oh, he got into daily fantasy sports. Oh, he got into sports betting. Like, there's reasons, and there's very logical reasons that they did get out. However, it is a bit surprising sometimes when you see someone crush a game. You know, I had a friend who was crushing 5-10 and 10-20 on his way up, young guy too, and he just up and moved to Dubai to work for a startup company. And he barely plays poker now, to my knowledge. I don't really talk to him much anymore, but from what I understand, he's just all in this startup and fully immersed, and he just kind of left right where he was about to peak.
Yeah, I know, and that's a really great thing to be able to do. And I wonder if I would have done that if I ever had that option available to me.
Would you have taken it?
But I didn't.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I do enjoy the game. I do agree with Garrett that, like, you know, the less is more type approach. And when I played higher, I mean, it was hard for me to get hours in. And
sure,
I've been through plenty of poker depressions and plenty of rough downswings. You know, I've taken my lumps just like everybody else. But you know something? At least during all that time, there was never really points where I ever, like, had to play. It's like if I wanted to take time, take as much time as I need, then I could and I would. And by the time I'm back in there, you know, you spend a high percentage of hours of being really into it. And, you know, to think about the types you described, the guys who are just in there day after day after day because they suck. They have to be in there day after day after day.
Sure.
Cutting out this little tiny slice. I mean, God, it sounds horrible.
It's depressing to watch, and it's not something that I would want to do or could do. You know, one thing that keeps me going is, for instance, the game that I play, I really just enjoy the people I play with. I really enjoy the dynamic with everyone. It's action-filled. You know, you mentioned stand-up game and all these things. You know, I think these are necessary things in today's games in terms of high-stakes stuff to keep people's juices flowing. You know, you have to keep the entertainment going, and you also have to keep changing what it is. You know, first we're going to do stand-up game, then it's progressive bounty, now it's the squid game, and who knows what's next, you know, and you have double board bomb pots, and these things just spur action and really create entertainment for people because it's different.
Yeah, and poker, I think, is just, with all the development of the game, has just evolved in this direction, because back in the day, where there wasn't that much development, poker by itself was exciting.
It was enough.
The game itself was enough. The game itself is no longer enough, at least not as you move up in stakes.
And I think some of that has to do with the game when we first came up was a lot more social of a game. I really think that, like we talked about earlier, you had more characters in the game, but I don't just mean the famous guys. I just mean characters in poker. You know, you had Texas Jack and you know, all these guys that had names. You had, you know, Nick the Greek, you know, it's just like you have all these guys who have these nicknames and there's a reason for it, right? And I think that with the online dynamic and also with just younger players being more of today's poker player, the players are getting younger and younger and it feels like without these characters in the game, you really lack that entertainment value. And I think that's something about these big games that's great. These private games or reserved games in or out of the casinos, but obviously it's a little safer in the casinos, is you get characters back. And also, you mentioned finding ways to get out of poker. Well, you get some really great alpha talking to some businessmen and successful people in other areas. You know, great contacts can be made. So that's another reason for those of you out there wondering why you would network your way in. I mean, you're not kissing someone's ass. It's authenticity. You just be authentic and be valuable, you know, and you don't have to like give them money. You don't have to lose your money to them in the game. You don't have to give them anything. You give them your time and you give them your authenticity, you know, whether you're a funny guy or just a really nice guy, or sometimes you're the butt of the joke. And realistically, you can gain value just by having a chair in that game, and it's not all money. It's also just information. You can learn about some stock traders' big next tip. You can learn about the next shit coin that's going to go to the moon. And look, these are all gambles, right? But you talk to businessmen and successful people about how they came up. I mean, you get to hear the stories. And I love hearing like old stories. Like I enjoyed playing with old regs. Everyone I'm basically a shit reg at this point. You know what I mean? I'm just like a live reg. And I don't mind that because, the younger guys get to hear some of the fun stories. And I loved and still love hearing the stories from some of these like veteran pros that have been around gambling and poker. They're the funniest things. Len Ashby, guys like Len. I mean, just infinite alpha. Like every story he tells, we just want more. Guys like even Justin Young, or just like we mentioned Chino earlier. And it's not just being entertaining, but some of the old timers that are still around are just great to listen to. Like Doyle Brunson probably was so beloved by so many people, not because he was great at poker for 60 years or whatever it was, probably because he had every story. He got robbed at gunpoint. He wrote the book on poker. He watched the transition. He passed on ownership to the WPT and basically gave up a fortune. And, that's a story. Like he basically went through that. So every old timer has a story. And these so-called shit regs can provide that value. Some of these guys that are just poker fans, they want to hear stuff like this. They want to hear fun stories. They want to hear war stories. They want the battle wounds. They want me to show you the scar. Hey, this is where I got shot in a 25-50 game in 2005. This is where I got stabbed in a PLO game in 2016. Like, it's just fun. It's fun.
Yeah, I guess just the whole nature of poker is to be this battle among bloodhounds, and it's just kind of been turned a little bit too much into an office building and, a cubicle environment. It's like your boss is coming by to do fucking 3-bet ace-5 suited this precise. It's like, this is not what people were talking about at poker even 20 years ago. So
right.
It's been a really marvelous evolution as we're going through. We were part of when it blew up, where everyone and their mother started playing, and we were there from like the first gold rush of poker, and then watching what it's turned into and being part of what it's turned into.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for lasting over multiple decades of poker. And I mean, I'm 39, so I started playing in 2003, but I basically went full time in 2009. I experienced Black Friday. That's when I moved to Las Vegas, is right after Black Friday. I've watched the dynamic of Las Vegas poker change. I watched an uncapped 5-10 2-blind game that used to play like quarter 50 sometimes with $50,000 stacks. Ironically, that same game now is a 10-20 game with a $20 ante and a $10,000 maximum buy-in. It's actually a smaller game. And part of that is just because of the private scene. There are bigger games available, and that's going to attract the recreational guys. That's going to attract the VIPs, and that's a fun environment to be in, but it's not for everyone. It's definitely tough, and one thing about that environment is you can't just go in and you're having a shitty day and just sit there and put your head down and play. There is something to be said about that. Like when you're in a shit mood and you go into a 2-5 table at the win, you just walk in and put your head down and fuck everyone and just like 3-bet them and redline the shit out of them and beat them. And you don't have to say a word to anyone if you don't want to. And no one's going to like think lesser of you, or at least if they do, gives a flying fuck. But they're also not going to take you out of the game. You're not going to lose your seat. They're trapped in there with you. That's actually what I do love about tournaments, by the way, is they're stuck with you. You buy into a tournament, I mean, you're in my cage and one of us makes it out. Or in this case, several of us make it off that table, and eventually only one person makes it out of the jungle. But that's kind of nice about tournaments, is like everyone kind of starts with the same amount. Doesn't matter how rich or poor you are. So I will say I love that dynamic of tournaments, but there is that give and take in cash, where if you play public cash games, you don't owe anybody anything. But if you ever want to be part of the private scene and get yourself into better games, you got to give something back. And people notice. When I sit down and I see a young player who's willing to be talkative and give up an edge here and there, I like that because he understands the big picture. He doesn't give a shit. Like, if the guy misclicks and puts 65 in when the bet was 50, and it's very clear that it's a misclick, what were you trying to do? 50? Okay, call. In a private game, it's always, what do you want to do? The action is, it's a Uno reverse card.
It's a gentleman's game.
Yeah. And, it's not a matter of, like, what you did. It's, like, intent to a degree. And that's what's nice with private games, too, is generally you kind of know who you're playing with and you know what people's intentions are. So there isn't, malpractice, so to speak. There isn't malevolence in terms of what people's intentions are. You kind of know that if somebody makes a mistake, it's genuine, and you want the game to be in integrity. Nobody wants to win because someone fucked up on sizing in terms of what they thought they saw and put a black chip in instead of a yellow chip or vice versa.
Yeah, right. They're not trying to take advantage of people or rather just fuck you like a company over any little mistake you made. We're trying to do this like, we're competing hard, we're battling, but like we're not going to be we're not throwing the book at you over everything. And this goes for everyone, by the way. This isn't like special treatment to VIPs. I mean, if you're a pro and you make a mistake, you deserve that same grace. Like, if it's clear, Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, if you want to play in the high-stakes games, you got to do more than just take money off the table. You got to bring something to the table in exchange for the money you take off of it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming in today to the studio. I know things sounded a little funny with our microphone today, but we both speak English, and if you understand English, then I'm sure you had a great time listening to Mike. And... well, Mike, we look forward to having you back one day, and good luck at all your tournaments. You've already sort of started out at rock bottom by stone bubbling, so at least you can only go up from here.
Yeah, I mean, when you start 0 for 5, you can only add a 1. 0 for 5 and 0 for 50 is still 0%. So, once you get a base hit, you can start having an average. But, no, thanks for having me. I am a big fan of the pod. Dan and I have been friends for a lot of years, and it's always fun to hang out and chat. I mean, we were talking for an hour before this. We'll probably talk for 30 minutes afterwards. And it's fun to kind of settle in and talk about some of these things. And, yeah, I'd love to come back. I mean, I do have a lot of fun stories, and it's hard to be put on the spot sometimes and just kind of, like, share them all. This was kind of just what do you want to know? Just, like, throw some things out there. So, it was great to be here. I'm a fan of the pod. If you haven't checked it out and this is your first time, keep listening. I'm sure more guests are to come. And, Dan's got a great personality for this game because he can give you the insight of someone with wheels on the ground while also providing a real introspective of what's going on in the inner monologue of poker players' heads sometimes. He says the things that we're all thinking and that, we're inside of our heads. What the fuck is this guy doing? And he's sharing it with you in real time. So, to be honest, it's fun to hear. It's refreshing to hear the honesty and the transparency.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. I mean, it's keeping me alive. So, all right, everybody. We're going to play some more poker this weekend and just, go in for round 5,000 million of torture. And we can't wait to do it. So, all right, everybody. We'll talk to you again soon. See you next time.